Hey everybody, it is Wednesday, April 15th. In any other year, today is tax day. Not today. You have 3 extra months. There's Lois settling in. Hopefully settling in. Hope you all are having a great day. I know Grace is starting a watch party. Hello to Diane and Nancy and Mike and anybody else who's already here. Today we're reading chapters 30 through 32. Chances are we will wrap up this book this week and start something new next week. I hope everybody's having a great day. I am. You know, it's amazing how fast the days go by in quarantine. You wouldn't think that would be the case, but at least for me. Thank you for the continuing emails and pictures. Martha at Carr, CARR.com is where you can send, if you want to write to me or send me pictures. I do write back to everybody. Martha at marthacarr.com. Love hearing from everybody. And there are a new War Mage comes out next week, and a new Goth Drow book comes out next week. So there's lots to look forward to. New Lyra starts June 29th and will go all summer long. So that will be awesome. But for today, we're going to read from Guardians of Magic, chapter 30 through 32 from the Lyra Chronicles. And I hope everybody's having a good day. And Mike, I hope you found us already, or you're looking quickly. But here is chapter 30. Lyra and Hagen helped Rose swing her feet over the edge of the bed and slipped a robe around her shoulders. Hagen gingerly held his wife up as he sat next to her on the bed. Lyra stepped back and formed a ball of light in her hands, opening a portal to the Texas sanctuary, relieved to see it was deep inside the forest, making it easier to find the gardener. Hagen easily lifted the small frame of his wife and stepped through the portal as Rose craned her neck to look all around her in wonder. Lyra picked up the oxygen tank and stepped through after them. Yumfuck bounced along on her shoulder, holding onto her collar. Lyra reached up and plucked him off, putting him on the ground, but he wouldn't move. "It's all right. We'll make sure to take care of Rose. You can go play. You haven't been outside in a while." But the troll stood right where he was, crossing his arms and steadily gazing at Rose. Hagen took his handkerchief out of his back pocket and blew his nose. "Will you look at that? He doesn't want to leave. Yumfuck, you are worth every bit of money I've spent on you, and then some. Next box of donuts is on me, again, and you can even have first pick." Lyra gave up and put the troll back on her shoulder as she felt the bracelet warm on her wrist. The bionic animals were nearby. She could sense it. The gardener was hopefully not far behind. There was a loud rustling in a dense stand of old growth trees, and Lyra waited to see an old bull or an elk with bionic parts. She could feel the connection growing as the animal drew closer. A figure emerged from the depths as the scales along Param's body flipped over from browns and dark greens to honey brown. "Param, you're better!" Lyra felt a relief and went to hug him as he pulled back, turning his left side away from her. Lyra pulled back, surprised, and felt the connection with him even before her hand touched his shoulder. A look of confusion passed quickly across her face. "The connection is with you." Param took a step away from her, a cold, angry look in his eyes. That's when Lyra saw his other shoulder. What was left of his arm was connected to his body by a reformed artifact. A magical prosthesis. "I'm connected to you." Param wouldn't look Lyra in the eye, and instead focused on Rose and Hagen. "Why are you here?" There was a cold edge to his voice that Lyra had never heard before. "Rose is sick," said Lyra, but Param continued to look away from her. "We were hoping your father could help." "My father is not a doctor," Param said bitterly. Lyra could feel the anger inside of Param passing through her. "He feels lost. Your father saved your arm." Param suddenly looked up at her, balling his hand into a fist. Lyra held her place as the troll's fur ruffled, and he stood up on Lyra's shoulder. "Please don't make me defend myself against you, because I will." "Enough!" The deep, loud baritone of the gardener of the dark forest rang out as birds took to flight, disturbing the calm of the forest. "Felix Hagen is always welcome in my sanctuaries." The gardener walked next to a large moose, his hand resting on the large animal's back. The vines in his long dreads wove themselves around, pulling his hair off his shoulders as small blue flowers opened and shut. The gardener was holding a small chipmunk in the palm of his hand as the small creature vibrated with fear. He's not fond of visitors. The gardener stroked the small animal's back, putting him down under a large fern. He quickly ran away, searching for a hole into his burrow. They're looking for a miracle, Param spit out, glaring at Lyra. We're looking for a way to help Rose live, said Lyra softly. My patience has limits, Param. Zip it or find somewhere else to be. Miracles are what we say when we can't explain things. Let me take a look. The gardener held out his hand to Rose, who reluctantly reciprocated. Lyra noticed Rose was already standing taller as the gardener sang out to the forest, and a yellow beetle answered, landing on his hand and walking quickly over to Rose. Ow! Rose tried to pull her hand back as the beetle stung her. Hagen pushed against the gardener without success, who still bore the same expression of stern mixed with calm. He shielded the beetle from Hagen before he squashed it as the bug released its venom into Rose. The beetle is sharing its gifts with you. The gardener smiled, something rare, as he looked at Rose. Take off the mask. You don't need it here. Help her. Rose cautiously reached up as Hagen helped her get the mask off her face, and she tentatively breathed in the deep, cool air of the forest. She blinked, looking around, taking another breath, half expecting to feel the crushing weight in her chest again at any moment. But there was nothing. I can breathe. How is that possible? Is she cured? Hagen was anxious and hopeful all at once. Cure I cannot do. The yellow beetle is from Oracern, and it helps align your system to the rhythm of magic. The magic takes on some of the load of working to keep you alive. It's the same theory behind why some magical beings live so long. Magic does some of the work. What does that mean for Rose? Lyra spoke slowly, wondering if she had done the right thing bringing Rose to the sanctuary. It means she will live as long as she stays here. The sanctuary is now working to keep Rose alive. But that won't work. I have my garden and the book club and all my friends. I can't stay here. Rose looked from face to face for another explanation. The gardener shrugged and let go of Rose's hand as the beetle flew away. You can always leave. You're not a prisoner here. Nothing that lives here is held captive. The gardener gave a side glance at his son. But you will return quickly to your former state. There is nothing I can do to fix your heart. It's one of the most complicated parts of any being. I suppose that's good and bad news. What do we do now? I had no idea this was a one-way trip. Hagen swore softly under his breath. I'm sorry, Rose. Rose took in another deep breath just as the sun broke through the canopy in rays that touched her face. She shut her eyes and felt the warmth against her skin, smiling. She tilted her chin down and opened her eyes in time to see a doe leading her fawn across a path and butterflies lifting off a forsythia bush. This place, it's not where I expected to live out my golden years, but it's a little like Eden. She gave the gardener a hard stare. Provided there's a roof that goes over our heads. She quickly smiled, her eyes shining as the gardener smiled broadly back at her. 2 times he smiled in one day. That's your miracle. Lyra shook her head. The world is changing all around me. Rule number 2, roll with what is. Another good one, Barons. There's a small cottage that's been empty for a while. You can live there for as long as you like. The gardener gave a gentle nudge to the moose, sending him off at a trot as he followed behind him, not bothering to beckon anyone else to follow. That's his way of saying, walk this way. Lyra held out her hand in the direction of the gardener, even as Param hung back. I suppose I can commute to work from here. You can even work from here. The gardener was going deeper into the forest, in places Lyra had never seen before. We aren't all pixies and elves in the sanctuaries. You'll find I adapted to reality and life on this world more than others would have guessed. The hike took them down winding paths, with Param following in a short distance from the rear. At one juncture where the path split in 2 directions, the gardener chose a 3rd direction and walked straight toward a thicket, only to pass easily through it. A glamour. Lyra marveled at the spell, taking Rose's hand as they pushed forward. On the other side stood a long, low building with a thatched roof. Don't be fooled by the simple surroundings. The gardener led them inside the building, only to reveal a room hardwired with technology and screens at a table down the middle. Hagen's eyes widened as he rushed toward the nearest end of the table, looking from screen to screen. You're monitoring the world from here. Hagen's voice was full of awe. This is like the warehouse, but raised to a whole new level. The gardener stood back by the door near his son, even as Perrin moved away from him. He put all of this in after the beast broke through the protection. Perrin's voice trailed off, and Lyra felt the ache pass through her chest from Perrin, sending a pulse through the scar on her belly. She saw the anguish flicker on the gardener's face. I should be getting back. Hagen, are you okay staying here? Lyra put her hands in her back pockets, watching Rose look out the window toward the gardens in the back, and Hagen resisting the urge to press any buttons. This might just work. Rose smiled as Hagen kept moving, not hearing what Lyra said. We'll be fine. I'll make a list of things to bring from the house. That would make this easier. She went to the door and stepped outside as Hagen reluctantly followed her. This is all moving a little fast for me, said Hagen. Rose took his hand. It's okay, Felix. We'll do this together, like we've done everything else. I don't get how you can just give in so easily. This morning we were happily in a life we love. We weren't. Not really. That life was quickly slipping away. I mean, I liked our old life a lot. There was a wistful tone to her voice. She crossed her arms, determined to find the good. But the old life was being taken from us, and according to some pretty decent doctors, pretty quickly. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like I'm struggling to be grateful. What do I call you? Is it Gardner? That will do. My given name has been lost to time and another life, and no longer suits me. Gardner will do. Perrin opened and shut his mouth a few times, trying to find the words. Lyra felt the beginning of a shift inside of him. Rose has her own kind of magic. Things work out the way they're supposed to. Another Hagen rule. Make that my rule number 3. I suppose I could see this as a chance to have a bigger garden, grow a few flowers. Yumfuck saw his chance and leaped from Lyra's shoulder to Rose, landing neatly on her arm and scrambling up to her shoulder. She let out a short whoop and held still, looking at Hagen as he rolled his eyes. The troll leaned in, whispering something in Rose's ear as a smile spread across her face, and she broke out in laughter. Yumfuck smiled and cackled, running back down her arm, leaping into the air, sailing across the distance back to Lyra's shoulder. Consider that done, said Rose. What did he ask you? Hagen felt some of the tension leave his body. All he wanted in the world was for Rose to be happy. It made it possible for him to do anything else. Show him a new mask and a cape, something in blue. I'll tell you what, I'll make you a few, maybe a nice gold and a red one. Rose shook her head. I suppose dying is just as weird, and that was going to be my next stop. You have to let go of everything you know, whether you like it or not. Making a superhero costume for a Batfuck, chirped the troll, puffing out his chest, his hands on his hips. Sure, okay, yeah. So I landed in a kind of heaven with a lot of weird mixed in. Where's this cottage? Lyra, can you make sure I get my sewing machine? I'm assuming there's some kind of electricity around here. Which way do we go? Lyra hung back as the gardener led them down a path further into the forest. She grabbed Perrin by the arm, his new arm, feeling the energy course through her veins. I'm glad you survived. It's the only thing I can think of to say. I'm not sorry your father found a way to help you come out of this as some kind of whole being. Perrin worked his new shoulder, a soft hum Lyra didn't notice before breaking the stillness of the forest. He didn't give me a choice. By the time I woke up, it was already done, and I haven't had the courage to tell him to rip it off. Lyra held out her wrist with the bracelet on it. I have my own kind of addition. I know it's not the same, but there's a similarity. I didn't ask for any of this. The light could absorb me into nothingness. The dark energy is hunting me like I'm some kind of prey. There are different sides, all seeking to stake their claim on this world. Some of them have better intentions, but I'm not sure anyone has the right to be called virtuous. What do you do with the new rules? Break every fucking one till I figure out which ones are still mine and follow those till they don't and make up some new ones. Repeat. Tell Carr it for me. You'll tell him yourself when you're ready. You'll tell Sonia too. Carr told me. She'll understand all of it. Give her a chance. I don't understand it. Okay, she'll get it enough to stay. That's the point anyway. Lois is behind me, Mike. She's being quiet. She growled earlier. It's not really growling. So Lois, we're on to chapter 31, but just to add, Lois is deaf. She was born deaf. And so, and I've had her since she was 11 months old. So I will often put my cheek against her and hum songs to her, and she hums often back. So sometimes when you hear her, it sounds like she's doing some weird kind of growl. She's actually humming. Hi, Kelly and Tracy and Nancy and Diane and Mike and everybody who's watching with Grace in her watch party. Chapter 31. Lyra met Coric out on Rainy Street just as the bars were warming up and the college students were out in force, moving in and out of the bars like a constant stream of ants. On nights like this, Lyra's nickname for the street was Anthill. She looked at her with a sea of heads bobbing along the street and smiled as she saw Coric in the middle of the crowd. She was leaning against the green Mustang as he came down the street. He was dressed in his cowboy boots that were getting worn in nicely, jeans and an ATX t-shirt. He looks like he's from Austin, just in time for me to drag him somewhere else, if he'll go. I'm going to have to get used to awkward as a state of being. Fuck me. She put the smile back on her face despite the butterflies in the pit of her stomach. I got your message from Turner. He said something about you not wanting to meet there? You two on the outs? Coric took her hand and kissed the top of her head. Lyra resisted the urge to look around and see who might have noticed. You barely flinched. Well done, Barons, he said, smiling. It's not that I don't like it. It'll take practice. We're not on the outs exactly. I don't need to have his house guest in my face. I have a better day when I don't have to look at Rosden. Can we go for a walk? Coric stopped in the middle of the sidewalk as people moved around them, some of them giving them the side eye. This is the exact opposite of walking, Coric. Tell me what's gone wrong, then I'll walk. I want to see your face when you tell me. Lyra leaned back, her face breaking into a crooked smile. Wow, that says a lot about our relationship. A shudder went through her. Sorry, that was involuntary. Not used to being someone's girlfriend. Girlfriend. She pressed her palm against her stomach. You're still not moving. I suppose if I told you to sit down, first you'd assume I was dying, or worse, Costco was closing. Something like that. Well, you can dial it back. It could be good news, you know. Is it? Depends on how you take it. First, there's still Sam's Club. Same deal, hardly know the difference, and Costco's not going anywhere. She pulled on his hand. You're still not budging. You still haven't told me. Spill it. I got offered a new job. Not really telling me anything. What kind of job? The kind that Turner Underwood offers that makes me more of an independent. Lyra shook her head. I don't really have a name for it yet. Maverick. You're searching for the word maverick. Lyra made a face considering the word. I like it. Independent. Make my own rules. Lyra pulled on his hand again as they walked down the sidewalk. At last, you're moving, which is ironic because this means I'd be moving. The setup is in Washington, D.C., Georgetown to be exact. Fuck, my hands are sweating. She wiped her hand on her jeans and grabbed Coric's hand again. Not usually this nervous. It's a good central location, some kind of mansion that Turner owns. That dude has got to be worth millions. Is that a normal fixer thing? Fuck, I'm babbling. Her stomach did a flip as she got to the hard part. Still rather run down a felon, clink of handcuffs. And I'm hoping that means you'll move. Coric stopped on the sidewalk again as a man ran right into him. Hey, a little warning. The man threw up his hands and walked around them as Coric took Lyra's face in his hands. Okay, we're doing this. Lyra felt her stomach flip again. Sound of handcuffs, easy confessions. Fuck it, just go with it, Barons. She stood on her toes and kissed Coric. Fuck who sees us. Stop swearing for just a minute, Barons, or in your case, talking. Coric kissed her back, and Lyra felt the same surge of energy pulse through her, circling around Coric. She pulled back, smiling, her face flushed and warm. A couple of fraternity brothers walked out of Eisenhower's bar, tipsy from happy hour. All right, all right, all right. Now that's a kiss. Fucking A, they're glowing. Lyra smiled, digging her free hand into her coat pocket. I don't suppose they're really elves in disguise. No, better. Drunk human males. They'll never remember. I meant what I said. I want you to come with me. Shack up with me again, but this time in the same room. She smiled, squeezing his hand, but noticed he wasn't smiling. Am I going too fast? The smile faded from her face. Lyra, you and I are both going to live to be hundreds of years old. Don't make a joke, Barons. Let me finish. I've got at least 100 years on you already. You're not robbing the cradle. I'm old in human terms to just be figuring out how to make a date. Had to make a joke. Elves are different than human beings. We find someone and give our heart away, and it's like that for life, for hundreds of years. I get that. I can do the math. Be sure of what you're asking, because there's no turning back. Lyra laced her fingers with Coric's, finally taking a deep breath. It's too late. It has been for a while. It just took me some time to get that. Come with me and we'll figure out the rest. She leaned her head on his shoulder as they walked. Fucking A, he whispered, kissing the top of her head. You know just what to say, Fixer. Better than flowers. Or pizza. Now I really am flattered. Just as long as you never call me Bert again. Lyra let out a laugh, picking up her head. Deal. Wow, that feels like that was a lifetime ago. You know, Rosden being back means I didn't exactly finish the Queen's mission. I know it does. We're going to have to figure that one out as we go. I get that. We'll take a new rule. I'm all about that. Rule number 5. Save the world first. Settle old scores later. On to chapter 32. Lyra woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing on her nightstand. She looked over at Cork, sleeping soundly next to her, and felt her heart race all over again. His skin felt warm, pressed against her hip in the darkness. She was barely able to make out his form under the comforter in the small, dark room. The bedroom was pitch black from the blanket she had hung over the bedroom window earlier to make sure no light escaped. Cork had laughed and said, "No pressure." But she had been right, as the shadows of their forms intertwining had played along the walls. The blanket had worked like a charm, not letting out any of the ethereal light. The phone buzzed again as she kissed Cork's bare shoulder and picked up her phone, flipping it over as she looked at the clock. 3 a.m. No good news comes at 3 fucking a.m. The number was blocked. General Anderson, I suppose I owe him one last mission, especially since I haven't told him yet. Hello, sir. What's happened? Cork stirred in his sleep, opening his eyes and sitting up. Lyra put her fingers to her lips as she listened. Nothing good, said the general. There's some kind of confrontation brewing in the heart of Paris. This may be the night we lose the battle to keep magic a secret. Lyra pressed the phone harder against her ear as a shudder passed down her spine. She knew instantly who it was and what they were after. The dark wizarding families. They were making their move to gain real power. The prize was Tess, the seer. Damn. We don't have any kind of official permission from the French, but I'm sending you in anyway, along with a few PDF agents. They've got a head start on you. I can have a plane waiting. No need. I can get myself there. Can you text me the coordinates? Already done. Check your phone. There's reports of wizards facing off against some new menace. Sounded like they were describing werewolves. Now, that's just a myth, right? I'll let you know, sir. Let me get to the area and see what's happening. She hung up the phone and checked the coordinates, holding the phone up for Cork to take a look. Do you know these coordinates? Is this the Kamana in Paris? If it is, we have a shitstorm that's about to rain down on us. Lyra was already rolling out of bed, searching in the darkness for her jeans. She banged her shin on the dresser, swearing as she fumbled for a light. Her phone buzzed again as she zipped up her pants, looking at the caller ID. It was Turner Underwood. She slid her finger across the screen as she grabbed a shirt. We already know they're after Tess. We're on our way. It's worse than that. Someone who knew her secret has betrayed her to the dark families. Lyra stopped getting dressed for a moment as Cork pulled on his boots. You mean Lucius, don't you? Man, he is the gift that keeps on giving. Lucius is playing both sides, and somehow he knew all along where Tess was hiding. Tell me Rosden didn't have something to do with this too. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Lyra pressed her lips together, willing herself not to say anything more. Justice my ass. She says she didn't. Lyra ignored him, moving faster. She balanced the phone under her chin. Turner, we'll do the best we can to stop it before things get even worse. Worse, like shifters tearing apart a few hundred innocent bystanders, or even one average human being minding their own business. We have to go if we're going to make it on time. She hung up without waiting for an answer. That was a lot of "we" you were throwing around. Cork pulled a thin sweater over his head, pulling out his long silver hair as it fell down his back. Fuck it, he might as well get used to it. There's a "we" now. Come on, those agents are walking into something they're not prepared to handle and won't survive. Lucius must have had a plan all along. Clearly, said Lyra, forming a ball of light between her hands. The question is still what his endgame is, and I don't think it's to help out the dark families, so it's hard to say who's walking into the trap. Maybe all of us. Lyra sang the coordinates into the light, opening a portal as she pulled her hands apart, making it larger. Grab young fuck, we're going to need him. Cork opened the bedroom door and found the troll standing on the arm of the couch in his cowboy boots, ready to go. Cork leaned down and grabbed his bow and quiver, leaning against the wall. Leave the boots this time, young buck. By our honor. We shall be known, squeaked the troll, kicking off the boots as he leaped into Cork's hand. Cork walked quickly towards the portal, stepping through onto a Parisian street with Lyra right behind him. I set us down a few blocks away to give us cover. Figured we would need to see who's already arrived and what side they're playing for before we dive into the battle. Lyra whipped around at the sound of gunfire and screams as Cork set Yumfuck down. Sounds like we're late. The troll grew to his full measure, standing up at 8 feet tall, claws bared, as they made their way toward the sound of a battle already underway. They turned the corner at the end of the long street just as people were running toward them, fleeing from something. The small knot of people took one look at Yumfuck and veered to the right, some stumbling, and one man pausing long enough to throw up the contents of his dinner along the curb as they fled. Lyra pulled in energy as the symbols lit up along her skin, flipping over at an ever-increasing rate. Cork glanced down to get a glimpse of what the magic was predicting and grimaced. He didn't like what he saw. As they got closer, Lyra formed a fireball in her hands, ready to aim it at whoever or whatever she saw first. At last she got to the side street, set among 3-story brick buildings that must have looked picturesque in better times. But tonight, all Lyra could focus on were the shifters growling and pawing at the ground on one side, and the witches and wizards on the other in close quarters, their wands drawn. Trapped to one side, pinned against the dead end were the PDF agents, or what was left of them. 2 were already laying still on the ground. Alan. Lyra watched in horror as Alan Cohen moved his gun back and forth between the 2 sides. He had the same determined look as when he faced down the dark mist. Cork pulled down an arrow, lighting up the sharp end with a fireball and taking aim at Sirius Pickering standing in front of the witches and wizards. Look out! Agnes swung around with her wand, aiming it right at the arrow, but not soon enough to deflect it entirely. The fiery ball caught Sirius in the shoulder, burning a hole through to the bone as he cried out in pain, dropping his wand. He gritted his teeth and picked up his wand with his other hand as he aimed it at the agent standing next to Alan. Alan fired his gun, but this time Agnes did a better job of deflecting the bullet, creating a transparent shield of energy, sending the bullet around in a ricochet as Sirius sucked the breath out of another agent, dropping her to the cobblestone street, lifeless. Alan made himself stand still and fire again, putting himself between the dark magic and the 2 remaining agents behind him as the shifters closed in toward them. Lyra threw the fireball in her hand, watching it divide into 100 smaller balls of blue fire, seeking out their targets, pelting the faces of the Dark family standing in the front. The embers hit their targets, burning holes into their skin, not letting up as Lyra ran as fast as she could toward the middle, feeling the muscles in her legs responding as she picked up speed. The shifters growled, pawing the ground, and moved in closer toward the agents. Cork drew another arrow and aimed it at the shifters as Lyra yelled to him, "Stop! They're not attacking the agents. Something is off. Where's Lucius? Aim at the families. Yumfuck, defend the humans. I'm going to find Lucius. He's here somewhere." Yumfuck turned his back to Cork, roaring at the shifters, swiping at the closest beast, leaving a long, thin wound along the shifter's neck and face. Cork stood directly behind him, facing the Dark families, his bow raised with another arrow, his jaw set. He aimed the arrow high over the heads of the front row at the wizards and witches behind them, showering them with blue embers, setting them on fire as they rolled on the ground screaming. As he hoped, some of the front line turned with their wands to put out the flames, and Cork saw his chance, firing off one arrow after another, all aimed at Sirius. Take out the head of the snake. Alan stood his ground just to the right of Cork, still aiming his gun, not sure what else to do. The remaining 2 agents behind him aimed their weapons at the shifters, their eyes wide with fear, even as they didn't give any ground. A shifter leapt at an agent as Yumfuck moved swiftly, catching the beast in the air and whipping him against the nearest brick wall, knocking him unconscious. He quickly shifted back to his human form, laying still on the ground. The agents looked on in horror as they realized the beasts in front of them were part human. What the fuck is going on? Sirius screamed in anger. His entire plan was blowing up in his face. None of his precious shifters were obeying his commands. Even the ones created from his own former ranks were siding with their alpha, Lucius. Hi, Sheila. Glad to see you here. Let's do one more. Why not? Let's do chapter 33, right at the good part. And then we'll stop. Chapter 33. Lyra moved down a side alley, sending out a stream of magic ahead of her. Find Lucius. She traced the stream of dark magic to an old patisserie. The front window was shattered, and the bakers in dusty gray aprons were spilling out the front. Found him. She rushed inside, rushing to the back, and found herself running to the back, and found herself face to face with Lucius, his claws wrapped tightly around Tess's arm, her long white hair falling across her face. Her eyes were a blank stare. An older baker with red hair was standing in front of Lucius, holding a long wooden peel, swatting at the beast as if he were just a pesky fly. A cigarette was firmly clamped in his mouth, smoke pouring out as his breathing picked up, determined to defend the seer from all comers. He wasn't going to betray his promise. Lyra threw a fireball at Lucius, watching it split in fragments as it found its target, as Lucius raised a claw to shred the lone baker. Lyra sent out a pulse of energy, throwing the baker off his feet and out of harm's way just as the claws came down, barely missing their mark. Now it was between Lyra and Lucius, and the prize was the seer. Tess raised her head and turned her face to the left and the right, sensing Lyra's presence. "No," she hissed. "This was the trap. Run! Get out! Run!" Lyra noticed too late. The black mist swept in, rolling in large clouds along the floor, already engulfing her legs. It had grown more powerful since Lucius had escaped the world in between. Lyra could feel the cries of all the beings the dark mist had trapped. The sound was excruciating. Lucius smiled, letting out a low growl. "I made a deal with the dark energy that runs through the void. My part of it was to deliver you. Getting Tess is a bonus," he growled. Lyra reached for the bracelet, taking it off her wrist, ready to fling it in Lucius' face. "Stop!" yelled Tess, reading the energy in front of her. "Just run!" "I never run from a fight," whispered Lyra as she raised her hand. Something powerful shoved her back before she could throw the artifact, knocking her to the ground. She looked up to see Rosden, standing in front of her, hunched over, facing Lucius. "It's me you want, motherfucker." Rosden raised her arms, swirling the black mist around all of them as if they were inside of a tornado, the familiar roar of a train drowning out the fight from the street. "This was the part of the deal I was after," yelled Lucius, loosening his grip on Tess. Rosden raised her withered arms, drawing on as much energy as she could through her dying body, as she whispered an ancient dark spell. Lyra got to her feet, ready to fight. He can't breathe. She's sucking the life out of him. Lyra hesitated, not sure who to trust, as Lucius bore down, his face grimacing in pain as he struggled to close in on Rosden. He let go of Tess as Lyra reached out her hand, yanking at Tess's arm and pulling her close. Lucius reared back, his mouth opened wide, screaming in pain as he decided to inflict a little pain of his own, grasping at Tess, scraping his claws along her arm. Lyra grabbed onto Lucius's arm, the artifact still in her hand, burning brightly, branding him with the liquid stone. The shifter yelped in pain, pulling back his hand as Rosden continued the spell. But Lucius wasn't done yet. He had waited 800 years for his revenge, always watching life move on without him. He wasn't going to be denied. With his last breath, he lunged forward, using the weight of his body to propel him the last of the way, sinking his claws into Rosden's chest, even as she whispered the last of the spell. There was a satisfying smile on his face as he collapsed to the ground, pushing deeper into her flesh, even as his body was shifting back into the form of a light elf. Lyra ran over to Rosden, even as the dark mist was creeping back toward her, this time more slowly. Lyra grabbed towels from the counter and pressing them against Rosden's wound, watching the white linen turn a rapid crimson. "I can't stop it. Tell me how to stop it. You have to have a spell for this too." Rosden looked up at Lyra, locking eyes with her only inches apart. Her body was growing limp as she shifted one last time back to the beauty she had been all those years. She was young again, for just a moment. "I'm sorry," she said as she drew her last breath, gasping as the life ran out of her, and her body quickly turned to ash, running through Lyra's hands, sinking into the mist as it continued to rise, pulling at Lyra's feet. Lyra shook her head, anger and remorse coursing through her. She stood upright, pulling in all the energy she could, dropping the bracelet as the light quickly spread through her, balancing out the darkness, opening up the void. Lyra's eyes widened as she looked directly into the world in between and saw thousands of desperate faces looking back at her. "Lyra, no!" She looked toward the door in time to see Carr rushing in, Param and Osonia right behind him. "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes shining as she looked at Carr, and the mist pulled her closer toward the edge. Carr reached for her hand, unwilling to let her go, as Param held him back, using the energy of his bionic arm to stop his friend. Lyra smiled for a moment at Param, grateful Quirk was out of harm's way, even as the tips of her shoes went over the edge. Osonia saw an opening and slipped past Param and Quirk, pulling in her own energy to shove Lyra back just as the void opened wide, sucking her inside of the darkness as it closed around Osonia's surprised face. Lyra's eyes widened in horror, and she summoned the energy within her, willing it to tear the void open again, the energy lifting her off the floor. But Lyra could also feel the absence of the dark magic. The world in between was closed, and with Osonia inside of it, even as the light sought to claim her for its own. Param dropped his grip on Quirk and screamed out, swiping at the air where Osonia had just been standing, helpless to save her. Quirk slid across the floor, grabbing the artifact as the light continued to build in Lyra, lifting her higher. He pulled her down closer to the ground, the bracelet digging in against her exposed stomach, all the while pulling her body toward him, pressing his chest tightly to her as the light did its best to push away the energy that sought to control it. Every muscle in his body was at the breaking point as he held onto Lyra, refusing to let go, the stone in the middle of the artifact spinning as it turned to liquid, pummeling back against the light. The baker crawled in front of Tess, pushing her toward the secret passageway behind the enchanted oven. Higna dir somalar landi. The old door creaked open as the baker helped Tess to her feet and picked her up, carrying her down the stone steps of the kamana as the oven closed behind them. He had kept his word, his cigarette still clenched in his mouth. The light began to give way, even as the energy still pulled through the middle of Lyra, her toes still off the ground, burning through the scar on her abdomen. Quirk held on tightly, unwilling to let go, the artifact pressed between them, his face inches from Lyra's. Lyra grabbed onto him, wrapping her arms around his neck, pressing the side of her face against his, her fingers gripping his skin as the energy finally ebbed and the room grew quiet. Lyra's feet came down to the floor as Quirk slipped the bracelet back on her wrist. Never again. Make that another one of your rules. The agents. Lyra ducked around Quirk, her arms slipping from around his neck as he tried to stop her. Don't, Lyra, it's over. The dark families are gone and the shifters ran off. You don't want to see what remains. He left the rest unsaid, reaching out to grab her arm. But she was already halfway out the door, even as Quirk turned back to his grieving friend. Oh, Sonia! Oh, Sonia! Param was still screaming her name as if he would get an answer. We'll find a way to get her out, I promise you. Lyra ran down the side alley, listening for any signs of a battle or a wounded survivor, her heart pounding in the eerie silence. She ran into the space between the buildings and found the Alpha shifter standing guard next to a fallen body. Lyra instinctively formed a fireball in her hand, ready to throw it at the Alpha, as the Alpha turned and looked at her. It's you. The purple energy glowed in the palm of her hand. The shifter backed away from the body, lowering his head. You're protecting him. Lyra let the flame die out as she saw who was lying there. Alan, no. The Alpha backed away further, turning to watch the street, as Lyra ran to Alan, pressing her fingers against his neck. Still alive. There was a burn mark down his chest from a wizard, and he was still gripping his gun. Lyra picked up his head and raised it in her lap. Alan, hang out in there. Help is coming. Hang in there. He opened his eyes and tried to smile at Lyra as small red bubbles formed on his lips. Lyra. His voice came out in a throttled gurgle as she tried to surround them both in energy, but nothing was working. Alan, please, hang in there. His eyelids fluttered as he raised a hand and touched her face, letting it drop to his chest, and breathed his last. Lyra ran her hands over his chest and face, trying to bring him back, but it was too late. It was only then that she looked up and realized they were all dead. None of the agents had survived the attack. The war has begun. It's too late to stop it now. Yumfuck came running down the street, out of breath, as Lyra sat back, still holding on to Alan. He came to rest by her side, still 8 feet tall, protecting Lyra, as Quirk took his place by her side. Eventually, General Anderson arrived, and the street quickly filled with other agents reclaiming the dead. Somewhere in the middle of the chaos, Lucius slipped away, freed from the curse, but still a shifter, looking for his pack. That was pretty good. Hi, Belle. Nice to see you, too. That was pretty good. There's still a bit more to go. That's enough for today, but that was good, said the person who wrote it, but it was still good. I hope you all are finding fun in your day, even in the middle of quarantine, and I bet we're all discovering hobbies somehow, one way or another, that we meant to get to, and suddenly we're doing. Like I said, my email is martha@marthacarr.com. Keep sending me your notes about what you're doing and pictures of the views you have from your home or on your walks, for those of you who are allowed to get out and take walks. And try and find some fun in every day. I love you all, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Thank you, Mike, for showing up. And we might manage to finish the book tomorrow, I'm not sure. But either way, we'll finish it this week. I love you all, and I'll see you tomorrow.